And we've got a couple people who've joined, so we might as well go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. This is a special Small Business Administration Update webinar brought to you by the City of Southlake and the Texas Restaurant Association. We'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. If you have any questions during, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get you those answers, as well as we'll be sharing with you some links to several resource sites that are available to help you during the COVID-19 crisis. So Ronell, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ronell Smith. I've been a small business consultant for the last 15 years, and I happen to be a city councilman for Southlake, so I'm really involved in working with small businesses locally and nationally, and I just like to share my expertise and help everybody get through this COVID-19 pandemic. We're all impacted, whether you're a small business or large business. We all got to find a way to get through this.
Exactly. Thanks, Ronell. And Daniel?
Hi, everyone. Daniel Cortez. I'm the Deputy Director of Economic Development for the City of Southlake. I've been with the city about 12 years and in this capacity for the last 3 or 4 years. But I've been working a lot, particularly as everyone could imagine, with a lot of small businesses within the City of Southlake, kind of hearing some of their pain points that they're having right now. But I'm happy to be here and to join this great panel and to answer any questions that not just businesses within Southlake, but any businesses within the state may have for us.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. Emily?
Yeah, great. So Emily Williams-Knight, and I'm President and CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association, but also a Southlake resident. And so I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I can tell you over the last 4 weeks, the sort of volume of calls, the volume of email has been something I've never experienced in my entire career. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is that there's a fight for survival right now, and that really started to begin in earnest once the governor announced the closure of dining rooms. Each city and state sort of followed. We then had a lot of loan options and packages come out, which for the layperson, which is really all of us, we've had to become experts overnight. And at the same time, there's been this just unbelievable deluge of information to everyone, and sorting through that as a business owner can be really challenging. So we wanted to use tonight just as a way to maybe give a high-level overview of what's available to you, and then those that have questions, dig into some of the questions, because in many cases, as of Friday, you're able to apply for these loans. And so the most important thing is to get your tray and get in line before the money is gone. And so we just really want to kind of maybe instill that sense of urgency while this is not it's probably an imperfect bill is a great way to say it. I will talk about 2 flaws in the bill tonight as well, that we are working very hard with our congressional delegation and the White House to fix. But in the meantime, we just thought it'd be good to maybe provide some clarity as you were moving through your the struggles of trying to keep your business open, or if you've closed, trying to reopen it.
Perfect. So to get started, Emily, can you give a very high-level overview of the Economic Injury Disaster SBA loan versus the SBA managed relief funds versus the PPP or payroll protection plan?
Yeah, so
and
the first
switch to speaker view to make this easier for everyone.
Yeah, sure. So the first one to come out, obviously, what called EIDLs really, but it was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And we stepped up with the governor. We had to actually have all 254 counties sign on to this to go up to DC to be declared essentially eligible for this Economic Injury Disaster package. So I think the paperwork went up on a Wednesday, and we were told on Friday that the state had been included, which was great. And the kind of long and short of it, it's about up to $2 million that you can apply for. It's a 30-year term with no penalty for prepayment, and the interest rate was set at 4%. That is not convertible to a grant option, which we'll talk about in a second. But for many businesses, that was an option to get money in your hands quickly. And if you wanted to, you could actually push out the length of time to almost 30 years, right, to give you a long runway. And a 4% interest rate is not super great, but it's certainly better than having nothing or having to close your business downright. One of the changes that happened last week that was, I think, helpful, and overnight you saw the application change. So for this particular loan on a Friday, the site was pretty clunky with SBA. You're working directly with the Small Business Administration, that they're the processor and the deliverer. And then over the weekend, the site went down, and on Monday, it came back up last week, and it was just much better. But more importantly, a function was added to it, which allows you to take a $10,000 advance on your loan, and that money will get into your hands much, much faster. So for those people that maybe just need to cover a week or 2 weeks of payroll, some of our smaller businesses, you can actually apply for that $10,000 advance now. That was added if you haven't gone through the loan process yet. So we kind of stick that over there as sort of what it was the first opportunity to get some type of cash into our businesses. Then what came along was a much more comprehensive $2.2 trillion package, which was now deemed the CARES Act. I guess everything has to have an acronym at some point. And under the CARES Act, there were sort of a couple big buckets of money, but the one that's important to all of us was the $349 billion. And under that is this Paycheck Protection Program. What kind of a high level of this is that it was supposed to be up to a 10-year repayment period and an interest rate up to 4%. Now, I'll give you my view of this. So this is probably not published anywhere, but as of last Thursday night, there was great concern about banks being able to actually begin to process loans on Friday, April 3rd. They hadn't been given a lot of direction, in fairness to them. And because on these loans, a critical element that had been changed from your EIDLs, your economic injury, was really 3 things. No credit elsewhere test. So if you were able to get a loan somewhere else, didn't matter. That whole process, which takes banks usually a long time, or the SBA, was removed. The personal guarantee and collateral were also removed. Well, if you're a bank and all of a sudden a lot of the elements that you use to see if an individual or business will be worthy of that loan prepayment, those have been stripped out. So the banks made a lot of noise, rightfully so, because they also get audited and they have to have solid underwriting. So between Thursday and Friday, things changed to a 2-year repayment period at a 1% interest rate. So 3 days before it was about 0.25 we were hearing, but now it's settled at 1%, and almost everyone we're hearing has a 2-year repayment period. What's really critical about this particular loan is that there is a carve out for restaurants, hotels, caterers, and food service. That just helps with the number of units you might have. And so the way they count it is this 500 employee mechanism. But what's interesting is for restaurants, you may have 100 locations at 100 people, right? But we were going to be kind of locked out of that. So thinking about all of you and all small businesses, it's really this 500 person mechanism that allows you to use this loan and take a portion of it that you're using for payroll, rent, mortgage interest, and utilities, and actually converting that to a grant, which is also known as not having to repay this. Now, what's so important about this is that you can get up to 10 million or 2.5 times your monthly payroll. It all sounds great. And then for an 8-week covered period, you'll be able to take all those expenses I just talked about and convert them to non-repayable. So you feel really good about this, right? Well, here's the flaw in the system. In order to actually achieve this non-repayable amount, you've got to have at least 75% of the same payroll you had prior to this event taking place. So the total point of the bill was, let's rehire and keep people employed, right? So let's get people back into the workforce or keep them employed. But the challenge is if you had to lay everybody off because your dining room was shut in your restaurant, let's think of a Del Frisco's or someone, and you're doing the best you can trying to keep other elements, maybe curbside or converting to grocery elements, which is something the TRA led with our governor 2 weeks ago. But you're going to have to hire all those people back to 75% of what you had before by June 30th in order to get that portion converted to a grant. So I would just say, when I think about the PPP loan, you definitely want to look at this as an option for you. It is a great option for so many people, but you can also do both. So you could actually take the economic injury and maybe use that for working capital, and you could use the PPP and maybe use that for your payroll and some of your fixed expenses. But the challenge is, make sure you understand the math equation with either your accountant, your finance, business partner, or your local bank, and make sure that whatever you take out, that portion you think you can get as a convertible to a grant is real. We are sending right now a letter tomorrow to Washington and to our congressional district, once again pushing back and saying this element is broken. How can you possibly have restaurants or small businesses, all small businesses, required to meet this threshold when, frankly, we don't even know when we're allowed to be open again? So if they don't open us until June 1st, how would you expect payroll to hit this amount by June 30th? It's just not going to happen. So
Emily,
we're sort of, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So quick question on that. So,
yeah.
and I'm trying to pivot this from the perspective of there's any citizens, residents out there that may not be as familiar with the restaurant industry, but kind of on average, if you were to ballpark it, what percentage of folks have been laid off from the average restaurant that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, so restaurants in general, we were doing okay until the shelter in place began. And to give you context for Texas, which I think blows most people away, on January 1st, we had 50,000 restaurants in our state. And we employed 1.4 million people, and most importantly, even contributed 70 billion in sales. So we are the second largest employer in the state. We touch every point, and actually 51% of the dollar you spend a day on food comes out of a restaurant. So we are a massive part of your supply chain. And so when we started to get a shelter in place or a be safe, don't be in crowds, long before dining rooms closed, you started to see demand start to dip. And then we got the dining room closure. And for most restaurants, they have cut capacity of their employees by 75% or more, or they've closed down completely. We've already had 12% close, and those have indicated they may not reopen again. And so if you're a small business owner, let's say you're a feed store barbecue, because I just love Mike, right? And we try to support him as much as we can. But he had a dining room that was, I mean, that's where you went after church, is where you went after a basketball game, a baseball game, you fed the cows, right? Life was good. Mike had to overnight convert that into a curbside and carry out business. That is really hard to do, and try to maintain the same level of employees where maybe before 75 to 80% of his sales came from the dining room. And so you can't just think, close a dining room, open up curbside, and the revenue will be the same. It's right. Not even close.
Yeah, it's not.
And so when you lay off all those employees, and maybe you keep 2 or 3 just as a skeleton crew, if I was a business owner, I would not be comfortable going back and trying to hire a bunch of people because I can write off their payroll when I'm not sure my business will be operating at full capacity anytime soon. And so that's sort of the flaw in the PPP program. The second flaw, guys, is if you have not got to your bank and talked to your lender, and we've got great lenders here in Southlake, have that conversation now, because the list of people in line to get their loan processed is massive. And these banks do not have the teams of people to process. I think Friday, Bank of America had 85,000 loan applications to get through. And so what you don't want to do is wait and keep thinking about what might be possible. Have the conversation now so you get your place in line, because I am definitely concerned that $349 billion will be gone much quicker than we probably expected to when this bill was passed.
Emily, question for you.
Yeah.
Are there businesses, if we're talking about not just restaurants,
sure,
it wouldn't make sense to take advantage of this? Because one of the points that you made is, you know, some restaurants furloughed, some restaurants likely will close down. They'll never bring those workers back. But for those restaurants or businesses that may be on the fence about, I have this loan, but long term, the implications are I won't likely to be able to sustain my business. What are you looking at there?
I think.
What is the calculus?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So if we talk about these 2 loan options, really are about trying to get liquidity quickly. And that is for all small businesses, are typically not extraordinary liquid where they will have a year that they can sit, right, and just offer the funds they have. And that's the whole concept of small business, and restaurants operate on the thinnest margins, which is probably a lecture for another day. One of the things for people to consider, which I don't want to see get lost in this, is the employee retention tax credits. So one of the options is you could essentially say, I'm going to put the lights out on my business, my local bookstore, my independent bookstore. I'm going to kind of bring the lights down. I'm going to keep myself and my manager on, and I'm going to try to ride this out for the next 70 days, maybe 90 days. And by doing that, you can take advantage of the employee retention tax credit. And that is another part of this CARES Act. So you can essentially take your payroll of the people that are still working and take a tax credit for 50%. So you can cut your expenses in half if you've got any kind of liquidity. What I heard, you know, great conversation this morning, I had a business say, it's a pretty small restaurant, kind of a coffee shop. If I could just keep my 2 managers and I for 60 days, I'll be okay. What if I were to take out some money from the economic injury loan because I have a 30-year window, God forbid something happened? Can I do both? Well, you cannot, right? You can't take the tax credit and the loan. You can take 2 loans, but not the tax credit and the loan. So, you know, but I am finding some businesses that are saying, I'm going to put the lights to dim. I'm going to have just the minimum for probably 60 days. I'm going to take the tax credit because I can actually have half the salary of everyone covered, and then kind of reopen in June. So I think that's where the best thing I can say to people is you need to sit down with your accountant and your lender and say, here are my, 3 to 4 options. What's best for me? I would say that phase 4 is coming down the pike pretty quick. I think, this was phase 3 was the CARES Act of what we're getting from the federal government. But what we're not talked about yet is what we may be able to help in the name of other tax relief or rent abatement or other things we're going to look at on the state level to help small business. So I would really encourage people that we're almost at the beginning of this, right? What's happening, this 2.2 trillion, the dust hasn't even settled yet on it. I think that we need to be thoughtful. I wouldn't throw the towel in yet. I think get a little bit of that loan. And I do think that a good indication today was President Trump and some Republicans getting together saying, we have a health task force and that's great and we're saving lives, but now we need a task force for the economy because we essentially put our economy in a frozen state and we don't know how we're going to actually reopen it. And so I think for small businesses, I'd look at your options with your lenders, but I think it's too early to throw in the towel completely.
Right, Emily, and to that point as well. So as we really think about just the funding for the operation of your business, one of the things I'd like to convey to any business owners that are listening to us that you lease your space is please work with your landlord. A lot of them are not just openly advertising that they're, willing to work with you or kind of push back rents and so forth. But I've heard, through the grapevine and even talking to a lot of these property management companies and landlords that they're working with tenants on a case-by-case basis. So please, just like Emily said, don't throw in the towel. It's too soon for that. And definitely talk to your landlord if you're leasing your space.
And it's the same on taxes, right? So for sales tax is one example. We worked really closely with Comptroller Hager, who's been an amazing supporter, I think, of all small business and obviously of our restaurant segment. And we went to him and said, listen, we need some type of deferment on sales tax that's collected every month. And in the restaurant sector, we also have different beverage taxes. So, but it wasn't about not wanting to pay the money. It was saying, let us keep that cash as sort of liquidity to help keep employees or keep our business open? And is there any possibility of deferring those taxes, right? Can we get some kind of runway? Now, he's in a difficult spot because at the same time this has occurred, oil has gone, well, last week it was below $20 a barrel, then back up again in West Texas, and who knows what will happen tomorrow. So for him, looking at the kind of hole we have in our state budget now is extraordinary from where we expected to be this year. But I can tell you this, if you are a small business and you have trouble, especially this month, for example, in April, remitting your March sales tax, please call the 1-800 emergency number. We are hearing that just like Daniel just mentioned, they are going to work with you. In many cases, they're deferring, taking maybe 25% of that payment, deferring the rest for a number of months, or in some, and no interest and no fees. So, so that's, I mean, to me, that those are, Daniel's point is so good. Don't just say, I'm out. There is no one immune to what is happening. And no one's saying we want a free ride, right? But at the same time, we have to understand small business need liquidity. And so I think what you're seeing is, to your point, people are working with us and they'll work with you. So on the tax situation, call the emergency number for the comptroller. Joe, we can probably send it after this out to people, but they will work with you and let you keep that cash just a little longer to get through this.
Emily, you mentioned a second ago about the reality that many of these businesses likely will not be able to reopen. And one of the things I've continued to say, I've said this for years, for as long as I've been a consultant, is I want to make sure that any business that desires to be in business and has a workable business model is able to. What are some success stories you can talk about specifically in the restaurant sector? Because we see businesses in this area doing some innovative, creative things as well to keep the doors open. What are some things you're saying?
Yeah, I think that, this is where you see the heart. And one of the things we love about Southlake is we have a very vibrant restaurant community, right? And so I can say one of the times that most of us get more emotional is that we see across our entire state this entrepreneurialism and this ability of these small business owners, these independents, to think overnight. So my 85% of my revenue, in some cases 100, was just closed. I don't have an option. So I'm not allowed to do what I'm supposed to do. And so how do I change overnight to maintain some sense of business, right? But also, how do I keep my employees? So we've seen lots of great things, and other areas too, where we've been able to go in and support. So the first was curbside alcohol. And I think you can look around and see that. So we went to the governor's office in TABC right away and said, last May, we passed the ability to deliver alcohol, right, with food, which was the TRA's bill last spring. Can we expand that and make it for curbside? So if I pull up to Del Frisco's and get my meal, can I also get wine to go or sealed? And we got that waiver, and that was a massive win. And so that adds to the revenue opportunity for a restaurant. So restaurants have quickly moved in that direction. The second thing we noticed was that our grocery stores were overloaded. And even here, you could go to Tom Thumb and think back to the start of this, Kroger, and not only were they overloaded, but in some cases you may have been in aisles full of people. And that meant a lot of your elderly folks just stayed home. So we thought at the same time, we looked down the supply chain and we noticed that all the way down to our farmers and ranchers, we were about to have a huge problem with food waste and food spoilage. And all of our schools are closed. So all the cafeterias have stopped ordering. All the universities have stopped ordering. And you started to see this back up. So I was able to work with the state health department under Governor Abbott's leadership, who again, I can't say enough about his support of our sector and really small business. And we were able to get almost a waiver put in place that allows restaurants to sell any bulk items that come from groceries. So bananas, eggs, milk, bread. And that's done a lot in a place like Southlake, but it's also done a lot in some of our low income areas across the state that maybe get one trip to the store. And if what they need is not there, they can't just go to a restaurant and pick up something, right? So that was a huge thing. The third thing I think I've seen restaurants do is this idea of curbside takeout packages. So family meals. So putting together a family meal kit, maybe charging $50, and inside there are 3 different entrees, a couple sides, a bottle of wine, and out the door it goes. And so they're bundling things that consumers want. And I think that's a super creative way to do it. One of the things that we are working really hard with the USDA and Health and Human Services is actually to get Texas as a restaurant meals state for participation. So if you think about maybe in some of our downtown Dallas areas, SNAP benefits are used can't be used at restaurants, but yet most of your grocery stores are either overloaded or, and frankly, now you may wait in line 3 hours outside to get in. And we want to support our grocery partners too, because, together is how we win. And so we think we're very close to getting Texas identified, which means another opportunity for restaurants to take those benefits from people who need it most. And if what they want is not available at the grocery store, they can take their EBT card and walk into a participating restaurant and get that food. So we're, I think where you're going to see us go next, and I think this is something that's going to raise in importance, is the harvest. So we in Texas are fortunate. We don't have 1 or 2. We have multiple harvests throughout the year. And many of those are coming due. So when you have 1,000 acres of onions and no one to buy it, where does it go? So we are looking right now at leveraging our open restaurants as a way to maybe give them some income. The closed restaurants that have dry storage and cold storage. What are we going to do with all this? We can't simply till back in every piece of produce that we've raised in the last 6 months. And so that's of great concern to us because we need that. And frankly, the farmers need the income and the distributors need the income. So we've had a lot of discussions about that. And the first place we'll try that is Austin. We've got a meeting with the city council on Tuesday to kind of see how can we become, almost a storage facility for all this product that's about to come out, because if not, it's going to be lost forever. And so, Ronell, you're right. The spirit of the small business is so alive and well, and the instincts for survival is something I've never seen before. And so that's why an association like ours, or the Small Business Administration, or, the work the city council's doing, the way you're promoting restaurants and small businesses, I think is going to be what saves this industry. I really do.
Well, I got to say, you guys are really leading the way. When this first happened, I said to my wife, I said, I feel like this is going to be a long swoon when you look at the restaurant industry. It's really acute, right? But you think about this is a battered financial sector. You look at the specialty healthcare and how that's impacted. I really feel like you guys stepped out there and were a leader in a very meaningful way. You see people rallying around you, and the innovation that we're seeing. Like, I love that Scratch Kitchen is putting out a menu of items every week. I love to see, like, what with Perry's and Del Frisco's, they're selling eggs and bulk items and allowing you to order a steak for a much cheaper price, and you can prepare it at home.
And that pork chop at Perry's, right?
Oh my gosh, amazing. But you know what that does, and I'm not sure business owners realize this, that it curries so much favor with not just customers, but with prospects as well. One of the things I continue to say to small businesses and large businesses alike is that your customers and prospects are looking. And what you're doing now will better enable you to not only weather the storm, but be successful afterwards. Big companies, I was telling the story earlier, you look at the Facebooks and Amazons, big companies are always looking for ways to disrupt themselves. I really feel like what will come out of this, specifically for the restaurant sector, is a meaningful way for them to differentiate themselves, to individuate themselves in whatever market that they're in, right? For example,
Yes.
I use this example with a restaurant locally, as when I was telling a story to my wife. I said, you look at what's happening, these local restaurants are able to blue apron their experience. I
Mhm.
really feel like that's something that'll be long lasting. I feel like in the near future, at least in the near term, for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, people, they'll be able to get out, but maybe they won't be as willing to get out. And I feel
Right.
like with Scratch Kitchen and other businesses that are saying, here's what we offer, it takes away some of that decision angst away from customers. If you're like, okay, here's what we offer for this night. I do the same thing every week with Scratch. I know on this night I want to have this thing, and I'm going to order from this restaurant, right?
Yes.
I feel like, thank you for being a leader in that way, because it's not just, as you know, it's not just the restaurant sector that's impacted.
Oh,
So
it's
I've been
everyone.
really, really, really encouraged to see other businesses, whether it's a physical therapist or a barber that's providing videos on how to cut your own hair, or a physical therapist that's sending my daughter exercise that she can do at
Yeah,
home.
Dr. Groves actually did a FaceTime live with my Olivia to check her braces.
Yep.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Probably not as effective as him doing it, but it was pretty darn good. And so you're right. I think but I think what you just mentioned is so key. It's technology. And I think what we're realizing is technology started to permeate our sector, right? But I think what you're going to see is the transformation of our sector with technology when we come out of this. It's no
And it's
different.
going to be a good thing.
I spent my career in higher ed, and same thing, right? Look at now, we
Yeah.
danced around online. Many institutions struggled, and now you don't actually have a choice. And so I think it's the same thing here. I think, I was speaking with one of our local restaurants here, and he said, gosh, people keep complaining I can't get the phone. It's always busy. He said, but Emily, I only have 2 phone lines. And so you wouldn't have thought of that, right? And so if I do curbside, they'd call, that ties up the line. Then when they come, they have to call me to tell me they're here, and what parking spot ties up the line. And so I think what we're learning, and Joe will tell you, 2 nights ago or last night, I write to our members every night, and it was 2 nights ago, and I said, listen, you really got to start to think about, there's food and there's a consumer, and what can we reimagine about how that works that will make us more efficient without losing. What I'm deeply concerned about is we cannot lose the sense of community that our restaurants provide. And so in Southlake in particular, right, we are dragons all the way through, and we celebrate hard, and we just love to be together, and there's a sense of community. Imagine if things change so dramatically that all of that continued to happen inside your home. I really think the emotional and social part of a restaurant and a community is so vital and so critical that however it comes out, if it's more efficient or technology enabled, we can't lose the fact that people sitting around a table celebrating or discussing or mourning, there is value in that from an emotional standpoint. And that's what I want to make sure we keep, because when I see people's posts right now about restaurants, it's not the burger that tastes the best I miss. I miss going to Johnny B's because, and it's always the employees, with my friends, it's always, there's an emotional connection. And that is our deep commitment, that we don't lose that in this sort of idea of being more efficient and maybe having higher margins. And that's the part we can't lose, because that's globally what's the one thing that brings people together: food. And so that's the piece we're really cognizant about maintaining.
Emily, yeah, you bring up a really good point. One of the things that I had come across looking at the Texas Restaurant Association is that you guys have the Texas Restaurant Relief Fund. But one of the things that I've been getting a lot, as I go through Facebook and I kind of see the interactions of a lot of our residents just here in Southlake, is they want to help. They don't know how. They're told to stay at home, but what can they do? But what I really liked about this is, I know there's a lot of grants, there's programs, there's relief foundations and so forth, but they want to figure out where to kind of donate if they want to. And I think this Texas Restaurant Relief Fund is a great opportunity for them to do that. Can you just touch on that a little bit for them?
Yeah, Daniel, thank you for bringing that up. But I think we actually thought about this when the crisis began. We thought, do we have A, the capacity, but B, is it the right place for us to step into as an association to create a grant? And if we did, what would that look like? Because to your point, there were lots of little things popping up all over the place, but we felt like with our reach and kind of having the entire state covered, the thought was with our board, we probably should step in, and we're the ones, because we also have a 501c3 education foundation that we can actually operate this out of. And so most people don't know, but we also do all the culinary, restaurant management, hospitality training across the state in a program called ProStart. So we actually have students who maybe want to go the engineering track. And Ronell, at some point we'll talk about this, because when I took my twins to one of the competitions, they both said, why can't we do this in Southlake? But we have many, Keller, lots of districts around us have this program. And it's really for someone who says, hey, I'm college bound, but I love culinary arts and cooking, or I'm not college bound and I really want to learn a skill so I can get a job. And so through this foundation, we've got about 15,000 students in 150 districts in Texas. And so as you think about that, that's the future of our industry. And we need to keep them engaged, and we need to keep them excited about joining us. At the same time, how do we support the independent restaurants that maybe don't have a lifeline whatsoever? How do we become their voice when they don't have a corporate parent to help them through this? So we created the Texas Restaurant Relief Fund as a way to actually get money into the hands of these independent restaurants. So we could kind of go two ways, right? Our national association has given grants, $500 to employees that had been furloughed or laid off. We decided to go the route of the restaurant. We believe if there's a healthy restaurant, then we're going to have good employment. And so restaurants can apply for up to $5,000. We've been very proud of the number of companies that have stepped up to contribute, but also the grassroots effort. Last week, one of our restaurants in Austin held a super cool Instagram live based and had 7 or 8 different acts that are kind of what I call Austin music. And just the people attending live sitting in their homes raised $30,000 to help restaurants.
Oh, wow.
And so last week, we just announced yesterday, the wholesale beer distributors just gave us a check for $60,000. Now think about that. The wholesale beer distributors are hurting as much as we are, because if we're not open in our dining rooms, they're not getting their beer sold. And yet they came together as an organization to fund this, because everyone knows how important restaurants are. So I think a couple things for Southlake citizens. One, continue to eat out safely. We've had a lot of research. There's no research that shows this is a foodborne illness, right? This is an illness where you have to keep a distance, and the amount of care that goes in already without a virus into preparing your food and giving it to you is exceptional, because it's always regulated by the health department. But even more now, it's very, very safe. So go out to eat in Southlake, and by getting it at the curb or getting it delivered by the restaurant themselves. The second thing is buy gift cards. People don't realize that gift cards are a huge and immediate way to help a restaurant. So if you love your local restaurant and you want to get back to it once this crisis ends, buy a gift card today. Tell your family that you're buying them. Every family member pick a restaurant. Go buy a gift card from them. They're all available or available online from that restaurant direct. I think the third thing is those that are able, or even those that may be watching this at some point, if you are employed by a company, if you're in a network of high net worth individuals that are looking to give, please bring this to their attention. Joe posted the link down there, but I think, this money goes right back to independent restaurants. And to give you a sense of the need, in 48 hours, there were 350 grant applications, to the point where we had to pause and say, let's run through all of these before we can actually put more people in the system, because the demand was something we did not expect. This week, I think Joe will announce we've had a couple major gifts come in, which will be incredibly helpful, but it's going to take the grassroots and those people that work for companies that want to participate to make this really work.
One of the,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Go ahead.
One of the decisions we made very early on, the day we got back from spring break, when we were also surprised that all this was happening, because I wasn't watching the news, and me and my wife sat on that Monday morning and said we're going to eat out every day, and we may have missed one day, but I'm not thinking so obviously to the kids it became how many times we can eat out at Chick-fil-A, and we're like no, we're not doing that. But to your point, for me being a consultant, I realized that gift cards would really be beneficial, because so many restaurants, it made sense for them to pare down their staff.
Yes.
And ideally, if it's a 2 to 3 man or woman operation, they weren't going to be able to fulfill huge obligations. But then we said for those restaurants who did make the decision to stay open and who were adamant they wanted to have a staff because they wanted to allow those people to continue to work, we were going to eat at those restaurants and eat at them daily. So we eat out 2 to 3 times a day, at least once. But one of the things I've said, and Emily, you know this better than I do, one of the things that's happening is restaurants are really developing a cadence for how much delivery makes sense for them. You look at a lot of the delivery services that really, really cuts into their margins. I really feel strongly that some of these restaurants, not all, and not most, will be able to develop packages that'll be long lasting. And they can say, you know what, for the family who wants to eat here, and this is really us, because we're not a huge eat out family, who wants to eat our food but doesn't have to sit in a restaurant. Let's develop this, steak and dessert and starch and vegetables. I really, really, really feel great about that. And like you said, I really feel great about the way the community has continued to step up and support
and
them.
taking it to go, Ronell, I think is critical. And one of the, and I'm looking at the letter we're drafting right now to go to all of the mayors across Texas tomorrow. But two of the regulations that we would like to see put in place, one is that we want delivery fees to be capped, because someone like a Favor with HEB as a parent company have really stepped up. For the month of March. They waived fees, right? I'm not sure what's happening in April, but in general, restaurants could end up signing contracts or being part of something that they're giving 25 to 35% away to a delivery company. At that point, they're losing money on every order, and it's totally unfair. Yeah. And so that's number one. And they have the customer information, right? So that's even more of a double whammy. And then I think the second thing is there's often some hidden costs or hidden fees that will pop up back to a restaurant that's participating with one of those delivery companies, and we want those eliminated immediately. We've tried to be very good partners with the delivery companies. We know that there is a need for that service, but what's happening right now is you are absolutely on life support of a restaurant taking money that they then, every order they get out for survival, they make nothing back if not lose. And so we will be very clear in our ask that we want those two things changed. And I know they have to make a living as well. But when you look at the business model of a restaurant, I think it just seems unfair that 25 or 30% would go away and their workers don't actually even get tipped in that model.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to take a little bit of a pivot and be a little bit more direct about the delivery companies as we go forward.
Thank you. And not to be heavy-handed, but that's one of the things that we've absolutely refused to have it delivered. For one reason, I understand that angle, that 25, 30% goes to someone else, and this is not a time when they can afford to do without the 25, 30%. The other is it allows us to get in and tip. And,
yes.
For us being able to, it's not like we can eat $100 worth of food, but being able to look the owner in the eye and say, we want to benefit you in a meaningful way. And that's taken away when you have a delivery driver there.
That's exactly right.
It's just, one of the decisions we made when we moved to Southlake was we realized Southlake was a very special place. And one of the decisions my wife made that Monday morning was, we said we wanted to live in a very special place. We have to do our part to ensure that it stays that way. And if we're not going to support these restaurants and some of them go away, we have to look ourselves in the eye and say, look in the mirror and say, you know what, we did our part to enable them to be successful.
I have to say, we track all the different counties and communities, and we watch a lot of the trends. Obviously, because we didn't have any really state mandates, the governor was, I think, smart, and it's very Texas to let each city follow its own path. But even when our own mayor stood up to talk about the dining room closures, she was so pro-restaurant and so just pro-small business. And I think, I have to say, if I look at other areas of the state, you see places like Lubbock that have just rallied in a way that it's so heartwarming, right? You can see parts of Houston that have even Mayor Turner, who's written letters with me, right, to Washington to make sure that we get our fair share of support. But in Southlake, I think, there's almost a personal one-on-one connection. So when people are buying, they're actually mentioning BJ from, the sub shop, or Mike from Feed Store, or Melissa from Del Frisco. So it's not even just the brand. I think that what I love about our community is we have a relationship with the people. And that's who's hurting right now. And the one thing I didn't mention that I think is important is we have some of our restaurants or even small businesses, just forget about restaurants, small businesses in our city that just will need to keep the lights off perhaps for another 60 days. And they're going to have to make a decision about those employees. And you can argue this either way, but the bottom line is right now through July 30th, each of those individuals will be receiving an extra $600 a week. So some are arguing that means that it might be more beneficial for them not to work, right? And to just be on unemployment until the end of July. So how are we going to get employees back? But for most of the restaurants, if not all I've spoken with, that have to make that difficult choice, knowing that your employee will actually receive a greater benefit than they would have, right? Which is typically half of their salary. That extra $600 a week will help them and their family right now. And I think that really matters. One of the questions that has come up a lot is, Emily, how do we get these people back? The people we've had to let go, they've gone to Amazon or UPS, or maybe they're actually on unemployment. How do I get them back into Southlake working again so my restaurant can thrive? And, there's nothing lost in actually maintaining a relationship with that employee. we keep saying, keep a lifeline to them. If you furloughed them, there's furloughed and terminated. From the system standpoint, they're no different. Furlough just means you think you can bring them back. So if you have that choice, having that conversation with them and then staying in touch with them as these weeks progress, you don't want to lose that highly trained talent, no matter what small business you're running, to another industry. And I think that's really important as we go forward.
I wholeheartedly agree. One of the biggest frustrations that we've had is some small businesses we've done business with outside of Southlake. We talk to their staff and they've been furloughed, but they're still taking our money. And so you can imagine some of those services. So obviously we weren't very happy about that. And as a small business owner myself, I understand there's some difficult decisions that have to be made, but you want to feel like there's care and concern for your workers. And, to your point, I certainly want them to want to feel like they have a relationship with that person they had to furlough, because it doesn't feel good when a customer or a prospect reaches out to that business. Maybe they had an email they needed to return. They found out that person's been furloughed at the drop of a hat, and they've lost all contact with that business. That does not curry them any favor long term.
No.
It does not make you feel good about doing business with an owner who would behave in that fashion.
And we will get through this, and we will want those employees. And I think, we're having, as leaders, all of us are making really difficult decisions, but this is going to pass. We are going to get through this, and you're going to want to have that great talent that was like family before this happened back in your business. And so that relationship matters. And I think what you'll see across Texas is we will have probably a phased opening, right? So if you look at the map today of where there are cases, where there has been aggressive testing with no cases, you may see parts of Texas open before others, right? Or parts of the country open before others. And I think what you're going to see, and what we would strongly recommend, is that we have a phased opening, even in the restaurant sector. To go sort of from day one of not being open in a dining room and having 100% capacity on day one is dangerous from a health perspective, but it's also dangerous from the restaurant's ability to function. So even a small business, right, starting with shorter hours, but phasing ourselves back in, I think is going to be really important. And I do think we need to watch discretionary spending. People are being very careful with their money right now because there's so much unknown. And so you can't just go back and staff up and be ready as if it was January 1st. But if I was a small business in Southlake, I would be incredibly grateful, because as Daniel continues to push out incredible information, and Daniel, I'm going to have you, if it's Daniel, talk about the sites they can go to, right? Because you guys have put a lot of good stuff up on how to navigate. You've got a city council that believes in small business, and a mayor who loves to eat out and loves to support all the restaurants, right? So we kind of have the trifecta here, and I think we need to keep looking forward and keep creating a path to help reopen. And my job is not to talk about much about today, and it's more about what I'm working on is how are we going to make sure this landing or this slide into the reality of this new economy we're going to enter is safe and is sort of buffered for our small business community as it can be. Because we've never experienced anything like this at any of our lifetime on this screen. We've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could tell you right now, Emily, I think this is a great segue, that we're already looking at what recovery looks like for Southlake. I want anyone that's listening or that will listen to this here in the future, we're planning it in the here and now. We're looking at what it looks like to get a lot of these employees back. We realize already that that's going to be a challenge. So coordinating with all of our local partners, we have a very large service industry and medical industry in the city of Southlake, which a lot of those employees unfortunately have been impacted by this crisis. So we're specifically targeting those industries to make sure that there is a recovery and that we are specifically helping them in Southlake, along with partners such as the Southlake Chamber of Commerce. So as we're getting those plans together, we'll be pushing out more and more information, and we'll be working with City Council, and announcements will be made. And as soon as those announcements are made, we're going to be pushing them out as quickly as they come into us and those decisions are made. But definitely, Emily, just to kind of touch on some of the resources we have out there, there is one other grant program I just wanted to talk to you about that I've actually spoken with the TWU, the Texas Women's University. They have the Assist Her grant program for women-owned businesses, and they're offering $10,000 grants to women-owned businesses. And I really encourage any businesses out there that are owned by any women, and I know there are several in Southlake specifically, to please apply for this grant. I can tell you, I've spoken to them directly, and they told me that they, as soon as I pushed some of this information out, they actually received a little bit of a surge of applications from the Southlake area. So that was really near and dear to my heart, because I know that the stuff that we're pushing out is actually being used. But going back to the resources that we have out there, there is a business resource center that if you go to thecityofsouthlake.com, it is one of those big tiles that's there on the homepage, and you'll see Business Resource Center on there. I'm updating that page literally every day as new information comes out and updates. Now, I'll go ahead and say that the updates that are in there aren't necessarily specific to COVID-19. If you want information on COVID-19, the cases that are coming out, please go to protectsouthlake.com. All of that information is located there within the city's website. And it'll have more, we have similar information that we're sharing, but the stuff that's on the Business Resource Center side is geared very specifically to businesses. I understand from what I've been able to speak to several business owners here in Southlake, they don't have time. You know, one of the things we talked about is, you know, we have 2 phone lines, right? So I completely get it. And I'm tailoring all the information that's on there to be a very digestible small paragraph so that you guys can determine whether or not that's something that interests you, and then you could dive in. But I encourage you all to go on there. And then we mentioned a little bit of the support that we were talking about, grocery stores, and of course, the dining with social distancing. We're updating 2 spreadsheets every single week with a lot of our staff that are telecommuting. And they're calling these businesses to make sure that they're still open, and to see if they've had any changes in operation. I can tell you every single week that we've reached out to these businesses, there's been some level of change. Not necessarily with all businesses. Of course, some have adopted things quicker than others, but I think as some businesses have realized that, okay, this isn't going away next week, they're definitely modifying their operation. In addition to that, I mentioned the grocery stores and pharmacies. You know, those are 2 supply lines for every single resident, as we talked about. Pharmacies are so critical to several of us. So we've also developed a spreadsheet that we're updating on a weekly basis as well, that has the hours of operation, the contactless delivery, or the contactless curbside pickup, and so forth, that we're going to be continuing to update from week to week to make sure that all of our residents and all of the local areas in Northeast Tarrant County know that that information is out there, and ultimately to continue to support a lot of our local businesses, because as you could imagine, grocery stores, of course, a lot of them have pharmacies in there, but we do have some standalone pharmacies out there that could really use the help. And right now, I'm sure a lot of them are struggling just like any other business.
Yeah, and so Daniel, that'd be my plug for so here's my letter that's going to come to you guys tomorrow in Southlake for what we need for small businesses. So I'll just give you a little sneak peek first, but you're right. I mean, and so, you know, just as our president and our governor have held press conferences every single day, and we've had a lot of health experts because we need to save lives, we would really argue that we also need to make sure, and I'm so pleased to hear Southlake's doing this, that we start to have the dialogue and include those business voices in to make sure that we have the right mechanisms to get people reopened. Or frankly, to help them turn the corner of survival. And I think that's real, and I'm so glad you're on top of it. I know many of our big cities have now formed these coalitions and there's one I'm on, which is sort of this, you know, how do you talk about reopening, right? Is it liquidity? Is it regulation, right? There are regulations that have to be suspended. There's just so many things to think through. So I'm just really pleased, and I encourage all of you, and Ronell, you too, is sort of think about that, because I think there will be a bit of we're kind of till the end of April, and, you know, God willing, we keep doing the social distancing like we should, and we start to turn a corner. We're going to want to get these businesses moving again pretty quickly. So I appreciate you doing that. And anything we can do to help with what other cities are doing, or data, or, you know, Southlake is really special, but if I can be of support of things that we're seeing, I'm happy to share anything to be helpful.
Thank you.
To buttress Daniel's point, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to be a councilman and was involved in Business Buddies was to support businesses here locally. And so one of the things I've tried to do is share my expertise to keep any business open and help it be more successful. But I can say it is a united front. I mean, none of these decisions does council take lightly. This is a very small community. We think about 30,000 people. The pain is really, really acute. And we're working to make sure these businesses are can stay open, but we're also looking to the future as well. This won't last always, and we have to prepare them for the eventuality of what happens after this. And that, I can tell you that there's not a day that goes by that as a council we are challenging ourselves to think of new and creative ways to ensure the vitality of our businesses. That is top of mind. Like I said, this is not a 200,000 person community. I mean, you not only know the people who go to the restaurants, you know the restaurant owners, like you were talking about, whether it's Ted Bilski at Scratch or Mike at.
Yeah, Ted's a great guy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when I think of a restaurant, to your point, I think of the owner. I think about the owners of Cool Greens. Think about the people at Luna Grill or My Light Kitchen. So many.
And many of their employees, right? They're part of it. I mean, I wrote something last night and I said, Dunkin' Donuts, that's my thing. I was raised in New England. I just love Dunkin' Donuts and now Dunkin'. And so I go through the drive-through and usually the same young woman is there. And for me, it's that sense of normal right now. That's the one thing that's been a constant in my life is being able to get in the drive-through. And I want that business to be there. Now they're a national chain, but they're very important for me as a part of the community and wanting to get one in Southlake someday, right? And so that it's the employees, it's the atmosphere, and frankly, it's the sense of belonging that a restaurant creates that we don't want to lose in our community.
The substance of this interaction here with you, Emily, me, Daniel, I'll even include the chamber in that. It highlights what makes Southlake so unique and so special. It's people don't just talk about it; they do something about it. The council makes a decision, the community falls in line, and it's not easy. It's not easier for any of us, but we work to support one another. And when I talk about what the challenge me and my wife had to ourselves to eat out, it was more than that, right? One of the things we said when we moved to Southlake 7 years ago, that Southlake can't be Southlake if it looks like everywhere else. Right. And one of the things I think about is, we have a unique brand of people. We really band together. We don't always agree with the decisions that city government makes or an individual in the community makes. But one of the things about Dragons is we support one another. And we will continue to support one another. And I can tell you, the entire council is behind you and what you're doing, Emily. And obviously, we're working with Daniel and the chamber. We're really a united front in making sure we get past this. To your point, it won't be easy. It'll be even if it doesn't last beyond tomorrow, it'll be longer than any of us would like. Yes. But I know we're all committed to getting past this and seeing businesses be successful throughout the entirety of our community.
Excellent. Good. Well, I think probably wrapping it up, right? About an hour, and hopefully people will post it, I guess, Daniel and Ronell, if we can post it on some of the social channels where our citizens are. We found a lot of times we do these at night for our members across the state, and we find that usually after the pickup is so much because they can just sit and skip through what they want and maybe get some high points. But same for us is, txrestaurant.org is our website. Any materials, we've opened everything up. It's to non-members. We just feel like it's the right thing to do right now in this crisis is to have all restaurants be able to have access to information. So you're welcome to go there to pull things down or clearly contact Daniel, Ronell, and they know how to find me. So if we can help you, and if you're a restaurant listening and you're not a member, just please reach out. We'll help you because we're here for everyone right now.
Well, selfishly, Emily, I'm glad you're here. but I know how great you have to be. You're a Southlaker and you're in that position. I know how much of a benefit you have to be to the businesses that you're serving. So they're fortunate to have you as well.
Yeah, no, I love it. Someone said, how are you holding up? Right. I just started the role in August. And I said, I actually like it much more because I'm mission driven. And right now, every day that I get up and the team, Joe and the team we have behind us all across the state, our job is to save our industry. Right, and to advocate to get what it needs to be successful. And I don't know, it's hard not to be excited about that every day, even though the days are long and they're very politically driven right now. But even my calls with our congressional members, it's not been a lot of right or left. It's been a lot of how do we get work done for the people. And that's been a really nice change.
Good. Well, I know from the text we've sent back and forth, I know you're working 21st. I can't imagine anybody working any harder for you for their industry. So I thank you for that. We're so blessed to have you here in Southlake.
Thank you. I love Southlake. And when this is done, we're all going to have a nice drink. Yep. I promise the beer guys will have a nice beer and some food at a restaurant together. All in one place.
Yeah, we'll have a gathering.
Yeah. We're going to have a gathering with more than 10. How's that?
Yes. Social distancing be darned.
That's right. Well, thank you all. Thank you,
You're
both
welcome.
of you very much. Reach out, Joe. Thanks for helping us get this all pulled
Yes,
together.
thanks, Joe.
And yeah, we'll go from here. Go to another day. Tomorrow's Monday, so we're back at it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
guys.
all.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.